they seemed like they were a part of me. They seemed like that I belonged with them and they belonged with me.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Symptom of the Universe by Black Sabbath, featuring my guest, Bill Ward, on drums. Born to a working-class family in Birmingham, Ward began his career as a teenager. In 1968, he co-founded Black Sabbath and brought to the band an iconoclastic style combining a deeply swinging groove with lightning-fast chops. Bill's keen ear for arrangement allowed him to conduct the paradigm-shifting group from the drummer's throne. Ward's propensity for drugs and drink reached an unmanageable apex in the early 80s, leading to his departure from Sabbath. Now clean and sober for over 30 years, he's participated in some of the legendary band's reunions over the decades. Ward also continues to record and perform as a leader, currently with his band Day of Errors. Just as Cervantes and Shakespeare are fundamental to modern literature, Bill Ward's contributions lie at the very foundation of modern drumming. His style is so embedded in the DNA of popular music that sometimes his impact can go unnoticed. But listen to any of the dozens of his classic recordings, and you'll be reminded that he's not only influenced everyone in his wake, but he's truly one of the all-time greats. And now my conversation with Bill Ward.
Most of the music that we listened to back then was big band jazz. That was American big band jazz. And as time went on, as we came into the early 50s, then it would have been the Ink Spots and the Platters. And then, of course, Elvis Presley arrived and Jerry Lee and Little Richard. So that created an entirely different monster.
Did your parents like rock music too?
They did eventually. Yeah, they came round to it. It took them a while to, especially with, I think back then in England in the mid '60s, we had a band, before '63, we had a band called the Shadows, which was an instrumental band. And I think my father was quite tolerant of those guys. I loved them, but it took them a while to come around. And some of the Beatles stuff, they thought it was, kind of amusing, I think. But whereas I was taking everything quite serious. So.
Even when you were young and listening to the big band music, did your mind gravitate towards the drums?
My mother and father would have parties at our house in Aston on Saturday nights. And on Sunday mornings, I'd creep downstairs and there would be a drum kit not as nice as this one that's set up here in front of us. But there would be a drum kit and there would be, the guy left his traps and, stuff lying around, so I would pick it up and I'd start playing it, and I was drawn to drums. I remember the Boys Brigade would come down our street on Sunday mornings, and I loved just the flair of the drums and just seeing the colour of the drums, and they had just copper looking drums, and with red red rope attached to it, and I was just, oh my goodness me, it just looked absolutely fabulous.
When did you start getting into drumming seriously?
I became very serious about it when I was about 10 years old, and I thought, okay, because by that time I was trying to master or trying to be like a lot of the people that I was listening to in rock and roll.
Your drumming has always had a sense of swing to it. I wonder if you ever tried to emulate people like Gene Krupa or Louis Bellson,
totally.
Buddy Rich.
Gene Krupa was my mentor. Gene's just like my man, you know. He's just like, I adore him. There's something about Krupa that's flamboyant and relaxed and more orchestrated than Buddy. Gene had a tendency to perform a little show, or he put things where they're not supposed to go, and I like that. I like that. I was drawn to that rather than Buddy was very much in the pocket and kept a very tight band.
You like the kind of more wild sense that it could be like a little bit wrong or something, and
yes,
then he
absolutely.
made it work.
Yeah, I like that, you know.
So you say that you became serious about drumming when you were 10.
Yeah.
Did you have an experience where you really connected with the instrument and felt like you got goosebumps or a feeling of ecstasy that nothing else brought you?
I think that, Joe, I think I had those things. There's something about drums that they seemed like they were a part of me. They seemed like that I belonged with them and they belonged with me. I even down to, tension rods and just anything, man.
Yeah.
There's just the touch of the rim, and looking at the difference between where the rim would touch the batter head. I saw everything, and I looked at that, and I was very studious as a young child to see and notice everything about it, So I was drawn to it almost like as one would be like a moth to a flame, or perhaps that's not such a good way to put it, but yeah.
It sort of is, right?
Mind you, it turned out to be kind of like that for a while. In my different, as history,
I think all of us
prevailed. Yeah, right, yeah.
When you were 10 years old, did it seem like a possibility that you could become a professional drummer?
I'd made up my mind that I wanted to be a rock and roll star, and the way that had come about was because I saw Elvis Presley, and I thought what he was doing was easy. And I thought, I'm going to be just like him. I'm going to avoid work. And I was looking for an easier, softer way and a secret passage through life. So I'd already, as a 10-year-old, I'd already made up my mind to say, that's how I'm going to be. I'm going to be like that, and nothing's going to change me from being that and everything else. Until I actually started to really get into that, and start to do the work that you have to do, then realizing the reality of that.
What did your family think about that?
They wanted me to be in the factory. I had two choices, factory or the army.
Did you feel trapped? Did you feel like you didn't have options in life?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was it. It's just like, I'm going to leave school. I'm either going to go into the army or I'm going to be working in the factory with my father. So, and I could hear all this musicality outside of that. I could hear all this stuff going on. We took a trip to New Brighton when I was 14 years old, and I could actually feel the city. The city was vibrant. New Brighton is next to Liverpool, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was something going on in Liverpool. And a year later, my God, the whole world erupted.
Yeah, what did the Beatles mean to you personally?
It was the get out of prison free. It was like free card. I think the Beatles gave me permission to try, and I think it was almost like saying, look what we can do. This is possible, and go give it a try. And thousands and thousands of musicians in England, looked at the Beatles and went, "Okay, we're in. Let's do this." I hadn't really made up my mind to be a professional musician. I just didn't want to go to work, so I guess I don't know, but I hadn't made a conscious decision. I'm not that kind of, I don't think like that.
You're not the kind of person that comes up with a plan and tries to execute it. You more operate on like a gut level.
Yeah, gut level. Yeah. It's like I didn't want to work, but I knew that to be in a band, we would need to have gas money or petrol money.
Yeah.
And we would need to buy drumsticks and things like that. So I went to work to do that. I was more than happy to go to work to earn money. And I picked the dirtiest jobs that I could find. Labouring jobs, dirty money. And I worked my ass off. I'd be up at like 5 a.m. in the morning going to work. And then as soon as I finished at 6 p.m. at night, I would go straight to play gigs. And we'd play gigs till like 2 in the morning.
This is when you were, what, 16?
16, yeah.
And you had left school at this point?
Yeah, I left school at 15 and a half, I think. Yeah, something like that.
Did you like school?
No. But I love my English teacher, and I love my he was also the music teacher. And I did a little bit of acting in school, but everything else I couldn't care less. I couldn't see any reason for it, to be honest with you.
And you say you picked the dirtiest jobs that you could find.
That's where the money was.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
What was the name of your first band?
They were called The Rest.
And what was the sound?
Pop music. We were just we were playing. We'd throw in a couple of blues songs, which everybody was doing. And then we would be playing whatever the top 10 hit was of that week, and so it's just a mixture of pop and we seem to have quite a good repertoire. We could play for a couple of hours.
Did you love it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely every single thing about it, I absolutely loved. There wasn't one single thing that I didn't love.
Even like
about
setting up the kit can be a meditative exercise.
That was all fine.
Yeah.
All that's part of it. Setting up drums, tearing down drums, putting your stuff away, walking home with your drums.
Right.
Everything.
There's an amount of pride that comes from walking around with your drums.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just very passionate about it, and I didn't know any different, so I thought that's how it was supposed to be. So it's not unusual to be carrying a bass drum on my back at midnight, going down the road or something, going back to wherever it was I was going back to.
Were you drinking at this point?
No, I was sipping on, I was taking by the time I was 15, 16, I was using a little bit of speed. I was taking some White Cross pills, occasionally.
Sounds like you would need it if you're working all day and playing all night.
Actually, I was a pretty strong kid. My energy levels were pretty good. I didn't necessarily use it for that. I liked the White Cross, or I stole an occasional prescription drug for effect.
Yeah.
That was it wasn't necessarily for energy, because my energy level, I 15, 16 years old, man, and with passion, you can conquer the world when you're 15, 16. At least that's what I thought we could do. So it wasn't necessarily hadn't reached that point where it became something, where the drugs became something else. But occasionally I would have a shandy or a half a pint or things like that. Nothing. My drinking didn't start daily until I was 18, and that's when that became an issue. So yeah.
When do you feel like you came into your own as a drummer? Like, when did you find your voice on the instrument?
I think I'm still actually in that process right now.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending journey. I'm always looking for something or new things or where to put certain things, or it's a never adventurous road. There's not a stopping point or a reachable place. I thought there was a reachable place, but there isn't.
What about when you were 15, 16? Did you realize that yet?
Oh no, I couldn't have possibly had that because I didn't have the wisdom or the experience.
So did you think that you were great at the time?
No, I didn't. I had very low self-esteem.
Why?
I just now when I look back, it's easy to see it's part of my alcoholism. So I can recognize that today because of where I am as a man. But
did it lead to alcoholism, or was it caused by alcoholism?
In my belief system, I think I was born alcoholic. To be honest with you, I started speaking ism real early, and I had to survive ism as well.
Were your parents were alcoholic?
Yeah, I don't like talking about too much about them. But not because I don't love them or anything. They were great people. But I had to learn, around being where I was from and, around different family situations. I learned to talk ism pretty quick. And I also learned to feel what it was like to feel shame or blame, and that's where low self-esteem begins to start its journey. So,
were you raised in any sort of spiritual tradition?
No. We tried to go to church, but that didn't work out. We tried to go to church. I was a choir boy. I love singing. I was a choir boy in the church, and I used to do solos on Sundays and Saturdays especially. Saturday was a big money earning day, because we would I'd sing in the choir for weddings, and I'd do solos, and if you did a solo you would get a shilling more than the other guys, and so I did that. And I also used to mind the parked cars. I lived right next to a football team called Aston Villa, and so we lived literally about a 1-minute walk from the Aston Villa Football Club and Aston Church. So living right there in that district, all the cars that came to park their cars, we would mind the cars. We said, "Look after your car, mister." And if the car was still in one piece when they got back, they'd give us sixpence or a threepenny bit, a couple of dimes or something. So I would do things like that.
It's against my uniform to be a civil judge. All the songs are history now about rock stars and their grudge. Let us cast our minds back to 30 years or more. You talk of all the vandals, well, heck,
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Colectivo Coffee. Handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at colectivo.com.
When I was in Birmingham, I've been there a few times, but it reminds me of my hometown, Milwaukee.
Oh, yeah, Milwaukee.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Kind of like a working class culture and lots of booze.
Yeah, lots of booze. Birmingham's boozy. It's the only place I knew, so at that time, even though we were doing gigs, local gigs and country gigs, and stepping out, especially with the rest. But Birmingham was my teacher. Is where I learned a lot.
How did you meet Tony and Geezer and Ozzy?
I met Tony when I was 16, and we were in a band called The Rest, and we needed a lead guitar player. And I'm not sure how we learnt about Tony, whether we, in the music stores you would see, names of musicians for hire or whatever. So Tony lived on Park Lane in Aston, and I remember there was myself, Vic Radford, and Michael Pountney, who were the original members of the Rest, and we went to visit Tony, and I felt so stupid after I asked if I could hear him play, or one of us asked if we could play. He had a Fender Sunburst Stratocaster, and he came out, and that was the very first time I actually saw somebody play a guitar correctly. And I looked and I went, oh my God, and we looked at each other, and I was flabbergasted, to be honest. And I felt like I was out of my depth, because this guy could actually really play well. I mean, really play well.
In retrospect, do you think that you were out of your depth, or was that just you being self-effacing?
No, I really felt like, whoa. It was, it was totally different. He was just felt like he was light years ahead in his playing. And he was happy joining in with us. He said, yeah, great, let's get together. Tony and I played in the Rest, but then we went on to play in different bands. And we eventually ended up, when we were about 17 or 18 years old, I think we were 18, maybe 19, we ended up in a band in Carlisle, Northern England, called Mythology. And that was a great band. That was a really good band. All the other bands that we played in I thought were great as well. But Mythology was very, we were, by this time, we were professional, if you like, or we're giving up our day jobs. We hadn't had a day job since we were 16. And so we'd reached the place, we were all living in one room in Carlisle. We had no money, completely broke. But we had a lot of gigs that we could play around all the Lake District area and all of the southern Scotland area. And it was a pretty good band. It was a blues and rock band. And by this time, everybody had gotten a few chops, and Tony was really exceptional. He just stood out a mile. But we had a great bass player. The bass player that from years before had played with a band called Peter and Gordon, and so we and Chris Smith was our singer, who had originally been with the Method 5, which was a band that Tony and I had played in as well back in Birmingham. So Mythology was aces, man. It was a good band. Yeah.
I want to get into this, to the way that you regarded yourself at the time, because you were working all the time.
Yeah.
People were hiring you, but you didn't think of yourself as a great drummer yet.
No, I've never thought. I still don't think of myself as a great drummer.
What do you think of yourself as? Like, what is it about you that draws people to you?
I have no idea. I don't know about that. I've got no idea what's in people's heads like that. Well, I mean, I think of myself as somebody that's trying to learn, and I'm definitely not a rhythm keeper, but I find myself to be an orchestrational drummer. So I like to build things, and I like to put things inside the rhythm, and I like to play in calamitous forms. And I also like to move around and blend and play dynamically, and so I feel like I'm really at the beginning of my drumming. To be honest,
that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
I mean, do you still get as much joy from it as you did when you started playing?
Yeah. It's just the same feelings.
Has there ever been a time when it went away?
There was only one time when it went away, and it was self-inflicted. It was in 1983, and I was starting to learn how to be sober and clean. And I went to England, and we did an album with Black Sabbath called Born Again. And one of the things I did Born Again, Clean and Sober, but after we finished recording and I laid track and everything, I started to think about the touring involved, and I became afraid of touring without a drink. I made a mistake because I didn't talk to anybody about that, and that became so huge inside me that it became so fearful that I drank behind the fear, and and it was a huge mistake that I did that. And I was learning how to stay sober, so I didn't know that was a huge mistake, but I found out that was a huge mistake. I ended up back in rehab in the United States, and I came into rehab, and that's when, after I got sober, I made a solemn vow, and the solemn vow was based on shame, because I was so ashamed of myself for not being able to go on tour. It was a really bad time for me, and I made a solemn vow that I would never ever listen to one more single lick that I ever came up with, melodies, poetry, writing lyrics for rock or whatever it might be, anything musical. And what I did is I capped it, and I just pushed it aside, and I pushed it all down, and every time I started to want to play drums, I stopped that. And I did that for about 3 months, and I became so ill and depressed from doing that and making this solemn vow that I would never ever play again. It was the most stupid fucking thing I ever did. And I'll never ever do that again. I'll never do that again, and I've never done it to this day.
I mean, somewhere in your mind at that point, you had linked the joy that you got from music with this self-destructive side.
Yeah, I wasn't too bright, I mean, I was still learning how to be sober, but like I said, I felt really ashamed that I picked up that drink again, and it went in after I did get sober. I couldn't stay drunk. I got sober, and when I was in the halfway house, that's when I thought, you know what, I'm just not going to play. I'm just not going to do anything. And but by not doing anything, it made me feel really, really depressed. Drums, music, as a writer, as a songwriter, as a vocalist, all the things that I do, it keeps me alive, and it keeps my spirit strong, and it keeps me just everything's alive. I feel really alive with everything, and so when I don't participate in my musical self, I die. I become I don't do very well. So, yeah. So that was the one and only time. It was late 1983.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Morph Beats, manufacturer of the Marvin, and several other delightfully useful experimental percussion devices. You can check them out online at morfbeats.com. Morph Beats, where art meets sound. Let's go back to the late 60s.
Yeah, sure.
When Sabbath actually came into being, you and Tony hooked up with Geezer and Ozzy. Did it feel like you had a special chemistry right away, or was it just another band?
No, it felt special. I'd been watching Geezer for some time. He was in a band called The Rare Breed, and I really liked him. I liked the way he moved, and it was quite obvious that he was somebody that's was quite different. We'd watch him walking up the streets and going past Tony's house, and me and Tony would look out the window and say, "Oh, there's that guy again," and it's like, who is this guy? But he drew people. He was so.
Was it the way he dressed, or just a certain
It's
charisma?
the way he dressed, everything about him. You know, he's very. He looked different. You know, and I thought, oh, but I took an interest in him because we both used to play in the same club. It was an all-nighter in Birmingham, and his band would play the Rare Breed, and I would be there, sat in the back. And I remember one time I'd smoked a little bit of opium, and I was just kicking back, and he came into the dressing room, if you like, or the back room, and he was trying to climb up the walls, and I just sat there and I was watching him, and he kept trying to take a run and climb up this wall, and I knew that I would have to learn more about him right there and then. I thought, oh my God. And he looked round, he said something, looked straight at me and says, if you don't first succeed, try again. You know, and I'm like, oh my God, what a character, you know. So I fell in love with him, and fell in love with him to a depth that became, he just felt like my brother, you know, just as I would love a brother, you know.
Do you remember the first time you two played together?
Yeah.
Did it instantly lock in?
Yeah, he just with all that, you know, he just shows up and plays, you know. And
you didn't have to talk about it or anything?
No, we didn't. No, I don't think me and him rarely talk about our bass playing or my drumming or anything. You know, it either feels okay or he don't feel okay. But and he couldn't play bass. You know, he played guitar. So we said, well, we need a bass player. So we just changed the strings on his guitar and started playing bass. And that's how that took place. We were only 19, 20 years old, you know. No, I've never really. I've figured, you know, he'll probably know his way around, and I'm trying to learn my way around. So, one way or another, we'll work it out, you know.
Do you remember the first time the band rehearsed together?
No. Yes, I do. I think this might have been one of the first times. It might have been in Tony's living room. Because I remember the first song we wrote, which was called "Wicked World," and I remember starting the hats, you know, and Tony had da 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 da, jazz, you know, right there, that's jazz. So, and I think that we did that, and we would also go to this lady's house. And we would play in the basement of this lady's house, and that's when we would get some whites and a couple of other things, you know. But we used to rehearse there. I always remembered Ozzy's voice, man. Ozzy had this beautiful, round, rich blues voice. You know, it's very, very, it's really strong. So, and I loved his voice. I thought, wow, you know, it's a great voice. And at first, I didn't know what to think of Oz, and then. It didn't take more than a week, and I really fell for him. I really was okay, you know. It's just like, wow, you know, there's something about him that we both found pockets where we could enjoy each other's hearts, you know. And me and Tony, you know, we'd been together for quite some time, and then with the other two kind of coming in, it was like, wow.
It sounds like it was more like a family than a band.
We could put it into a family sense, if you like, because we all had a lot of things in common. Some of them being, we were all poor. We all came from the same place. We all had same common friends. We knew the streets. We knew the lore of the streets. We knew there's a lot of things, you know. Not far from here is 6th Street, and there's a lore down there, and so it's the same. There was a given, you know, and so we were, they were wonderful days, man. I couldn't think of being so I'm so grateful that I was part of that. You know, it's just very incredible.
You mentioned that you like building things and kind of arranging things.
In music, yeah.
Yeah, how would you describe your creative role in the band?
I pretty much do what I do today. You know, I would listen to what might be going on. I only need two or three notes, you know, and it's usually either Tony or Geezer, you know, and I'll try to I'll latch onto that, you know, and say, okay, well, you know, where can we go? Where do I go? What will work? And I like to try lots of different things to see what might work and what won't work, you know. So I like to take my time. Yeah.
When you heard yourself being played back after you made the first album,
yeah,
what did you think of your drumming?
I thought it needed a lot of improvements.
So you heard it back, and all you could hear were the flaws.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Do you think that you've come beyond that now? Like if you listen back to those early recordings, are you proud of them?
Oh, when I listen back to them now,
yeah.
I'm really proud of them. Oh yeah, because I just see 4 guys, man, that I just want to embrace.
But if I recorded you playing drums here at this studio and you listen back, would you be equally as proud of it or not?
Oh no, because it
takes time to,
because whatever I would do here and now, I would enjoy.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of that back then because I look at us as really vulnerable guys, man, 4 guys, and so to me, when I embrace them, it's like it's a world. It's a totally different experience.
When you say that you were vulnerable guys, do you think that you were taken advantage of by the music business?
Oh, I know that we were. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How did that manifest?
We were eager to become further along the road, and we were vulnerable, and we let people in who pretended to be our friends. And they weren't.
Yeah. How did your life change when the band became popular and financially successful?
Well, I started drinking when I was 18. So I try to focus on being a good drummer, and I try to focus on being a good drummer on the road and in the studios. I was completely dedicated to the band. The band came first in everything.
Could you drink before you played?
Yeah, earlier on, but I stopped doing that. When we started doing really big arenas and things like that. I mean, in the early days, at first, I'd drop acid, as well. But I stopped doing that kind of thing. For the most part, I used to go on pretty much clean. I hadn't reached the point where I couldn't stop drinking. The crossover was when I was about 28, 29, when alcohol really became very serious. So, and I'm not saying it wasn't serious before that, but what I would do is I would wait until we finished the gig, then I would get as drunk as a fucking skunk. That's when I would drink and get myself wasted. So on gig days. So I would go on stage back then in the 70s with maybe having a couple of drinks, and that would be it. And then I'd drink large amounts after the gig.
Was the life that you were leading when you were playing to big arenas and touring around the world what you had imagined when you were a child, looking at people like the Beatles? Or
No.
How did it differ from that?
He always looks brighter on the other side of the street. I enjoyed the arenas. I enjoyed everything about it. But when you're in it, when you're actually in it, I think Lennon said when you're in the hurricane, it's like you don't notice everything that's around. So everybody else seemed to be in the gig, and I just remember being brought in the car. Then I go to the dressing room, and I sit in the dressing room, and then we were told, you're on stage. So then I go on stage. So that was it. It's just like, but the actual gig, I go to gigs myself and see my friends play, and I enjoy the gig.
Right.
It's just like, oh wow, this is quite entertaining. But then it was just like, okay, well, where do we go now? And we'd be in the dressing room just looking at each other, and we'd warm up, whatever. So.
Just in some concrete dressing room somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I've read some accounts of some pretty abusive behavior of the other band members towards you in particular, like lighting you on fire and things like that. What do you remember about that?
It was just one of our party tricks. We did it for because we're fucking stupid. We did it because...
was it mostly directed at you, or was everybody fucking with each other?
Mostly directed at me, if I have to be fair.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. I think I'm a good target, I guess. Or
why? Because they can see that you're like an empathetic guy,
really, just pretty laid back. It's just like I don't. I don't.
Did that hurt you at the time emotionally?
There were some things that we talked about, which I won't disclose, that I realised that did hurt, and later on, now as I've become an older man, I've looked back and I've gone, wow, that was leading towards being almost not so good, almost too much, it's just like so yeah, but I've recovered through all that.
Yeah, and it seems like you've done a lot of work on yourself.
Yeah, first went into recovery in 1981.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then in 83 you had a relapse.
Yeah, I'd been through. For me, it took the journey that I had to go through before I finally got sober. I went in to nine different rehabs and detoxes, or it might have been 11. I'm not sure. And from the period of 1981 to the end of 1980, to the end of the beginning. January 1984. So I'd had periods of sobriety throughout that time. 1983, most of 1983, I was sober.
When did you first stop playing with the band?
The first time I stopped was during Heaven and Hell.
Yeah.
1980.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's when alcohol had taken that turn. Remember when I was about 27, 28, I mentioned that there was a crossover point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I lost control. Up until that point, I'd been able to manage to control it, and then it controlled me, and that became very different.
When the band wasn't in your life, did it change the way you thought of yourself, or did it change your identity? I
think to a big degree. In the early years, yeah, through to 1980, then I could identify, as a that's a really good question. Not that the other questions haven't been good.
We're getting somewhere now.
We're getting somewhere. Oh God, it sounds like we've thrown everything else out. No, 1980. That was one of the worst years for me. Alcohol. There was a couple of other things. I was missing Oz. Oz was no longer in the band. My mother died. So I had a few things that were pretty bad. in 1984, which is actually when I finally got sobered up, and I've been sober since 1984. During I went in and out from. I came off the road in 1980, drunk, from the Heaven and Hell tour. Then in 1981, I was introduced to alcohol. I was introduced to a 12-step program.
Yes.
And 1982, 12-step program. 83, 12-step program. So I basically started to get into recovery around the early part of 1981. 1981, 1982. Yeah.
Do you still go to meetings and mentor people or sponsor people?
Very much so.
So what have you learned about yourself through that process?
But I'm actually a pretty good guy. I've learned how to love, and I've learned how to feel pain. I've learned how to play drums sober.
When you say you've learned how to feel pain, do you think you had like an emotional callus before and you weren't allowing yourself to feel those things?
Yeah, but I was dumbed down. When you're doing up a bunch of cocaine and a bunch of this and a bunch of that, you're dumbed down. You might think you're feeling it, but you're not feeling it. You know, you're in a different world, man. You're in Looney Tune world. At least that's where I was. I don't want that to sound accusatory to any other people that might be listening. Yeah. I've learned to take risks. I've learned to look inside myself and allow the guy that can write songs to come out. I've learned the guy who likes to take risks as a drummer to take even more risks. One of the things that I do when I first got sober back in 1984, when I first went in the studios, I was terrified, man. And what I learned to do was to walk around the studio and feel everything and get used to everything in the studio, because really I'd never played in a studio completely clean and sober. So it was a brand new experience for me. And so I used to touch everything, and I do that with other people. If there's a young guy or a young gal for that matter who's coming in, I say, well, just feel the drums, get used to touching the drums and get that association before you actually even make a note, you know. And so it's like, let's get into this slowly but surely, and let's identify with what each thing can do. So that's the way I like to, see if I was a teacher, then that's what I would do, you know. And then we'd discover the snare drum.
Yeah, right.
We would discover the snare drum, and we would discover the history of the snare drum, why we have snare drums, you know, why I use a huge sonar snare drum, and why people use piccolos, and why people, do different things with the snare, and the world is full.
Just the thought of going and touching everything in the studio is really powerful, because I can remember when I first started playing, just the kind of tactile joy of when I first got a drum. It smelled like fresh wood and tobacco, because the guys at the shop were smoking all day. Yeah. And that smell has it's wired into my brain.
That's the passion right there.
But just, sitting and listening to the cymbals, putting your ear close, backing it up, just looking at it gave me so much joy. And I think when you become an adult, there's a danger of kind of glossing over that or floating past that and trying to get the job done.
You're describing the passion, Joe, and I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah,
that's passion.
Yeah,
and that passion will always live. Passion, it will always live. I have the same passion that I had when I was a 4-year-old boy in Aston in Birmingham, going downstairs and touching the drummer who left his traps overnight. I'd go and touch his cymbal, and I go, oh my God, There's a
Yeah.
little 4-year-old fingers, you know, and I have exactly the same thing today. I'm going to be in drum rehearsals tomorrow in Los Angeles, and I'll be touching my cymbals the same. I'll be doing the same thing.
When you think about the legacy of Black Sabbath and your part in it, do you feel like the credit that you've gotten is commensurate with your contribution to the band?
Well, I think sometimes the credit is a little. I mean, we've gone from being rock stars to legends,
Right.
so I kind of go, well, that's very nice, but you know, I'm a grandfather and a father, and I'm just trying to make a living, you know. So, so I think some things like that. But that's part of rock and roll, I guess.
What about the way that the publishing was split up? Did the band split it up equally and fairly?
Yeah, it's all equally.
Okay.
It's all equal publishing. Yeah, I feel that what I've done in Black Sabbath and especially live has been. I feel very good about the way I played live and presented myself publicly, and things started turning sour when my alcohol started to get in the way. But I'm not ashamed of what I
Right.
stood for, what I stood up for, and and the fellows that I played with, and what we sang and what we did and what we. You know, I love War Pigs, I love Children of the Grave, I love all these songs. These are revolutionary songs, and I love being a part of that. So I'm not ashamed. I don't believe I'm ashamed of anything back there. The only shame that I felt was the shame of picking up that first drink in 1983 and letting everybody down. Yeah, that's the shame I feel. But
Well, that was a long time ago now.
I don't feel it anymore. I've tried to amend that.
When did you start having children?
The first boy was Aaron, and I was 26 years old, I believe, 26. Yeah.
So what are your children up to now? Are they musicians?
Yeah, one of them is. Aaron's great, man. Aaron last year was playing with Dave Eras. My other son he's a father. And what a great father. He's bringing up two incredible kids. So
Does he live here in the States?
He actually lives in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I have a daughter, Emily, and she has a son. And her son, Lennox, my grandson, he's kind of got an ear towards the drums. So we've got some musicality. My daughter has a beautiful voice.
It must be incredibly thrilling to make music with your family.
Yeah, it's heartwarming. I sleep well at night, and I feel like I'm doing the right thing. To see my kids stepping up to the plate, and you know, Aaron's such a good player, such a good keyboard player. He's a great songwriter. It's just like, holy crap! I had no idea. But he started playing drums when he was a baby. We used to have a drum kit set up in the apartment. Here in California, and he was playing drums. What 2, 3, 4 years old, just like his dad. You know.
If there's a recurring thought that goes through your mind throughout the day, what would it be? What do you think about the most?
A service, being in service. I've got much to be grateful for. You know, so. I don't try to be harmful to none. I don't try to be harmful to anybody, and I try to make sure I can push myself to go get the jobs of the day done. That's important. But there's so much that's water that, you know, friends have passed away. There's so much now in my life that I've got to be grateful for, and I try to be at peace, reach for peace every day. You know, that's probably the biggest thing.
Do you get there?
Yes, I do. I do a lot. Yeah, I learn to breathe and step back. I take a deep breath and I step back one pace, and I stand still. I have to learn to stand still, and I do. I practice standing still. Be very, very still. Be very, very calm. and I allow the chaos around me to be chaos, and not let it fall into me.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to end it. Bill Ward, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it, yeah.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.